Okay, so in this video we're going to look at converting between units. So the first one we're going to look at is just converting from milligrams to micrograms. So what you need to remember is that milli is 10 to the minus 3, micro is 10 to the minus 6, and nano is 10 to the minus 9. So when we talk about milligrams, we mean 10 to the minus 3 grams. So another way of writing 10 to the minus 3 is 1,000th. 10 to the minus 6 is 1 millionth. And 10 to the minus 9 is 1 billionth. Okay, so you can see why we don't use zeros like that, and that's why we use this power exponential notation. Okay, so to get from milli to micro, it's 1,000 times smaller, and micro to nano is 1,000 times smaller. So there's 1,000 nanos in a micro and 1,000 micros in a milli. Okay, so milli is the biggest, nano is the smallest. Okay, so if we want to go from 2.3 milligrams to micrograms, one way of doing it is just to look at this and say, well, there's 1,000 micros in a milli, so that's got to be 2.3 times 1,000, which is 2,300 micrograms. So you could just go straight to the answer like that. Another way of doing it is by using a ratio square. So write down what we know. So we know 1 milligram is 1,000 micrograms. So now we've got what we call a ratio square. So we need to keep these in the same ratio. So 1 to 1,000, you multiply 1 by 1,000 to get 1,000. So we have to do the same, keep it in the same ratio. So 2.3 times 1,000 gives you 2,300. We ended up with the same result. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, if we say we've got 300 nanograms and we want to find out how many micrograms that is, then we can write down what we know. So we know 1,000 nanograms is 1 microgram. So you've got 1,000 nanograms in 1 microgram. So here, to get from 1,000 to 1, we're divided by 1,000. So we have to keep in the same ratio on the top there. So it's 300 divided by 1,000. So that is at 0.3 micrograms. So the more you do that, the more familiar you'll become with it. And that's, just one way of looking at it. Let's look at the next example, which is 300 nanograms per mil, and we want to write that as a mgs per litre. Okay, so the first way I normally think about this is to, instead of doing nanograms / mil, if you write it as nanograms per mil, and I said per as I drew that horizontal line, so you know that if you do speed is distance per time, yes, you know it's miles per hour, and if you wanted to work out the speed, you'd work out how many miles you went and divide that by how many hours it took you. This is the same idea but with concentration now, so we're looking at how many nanograms per milliliter of solution. Okay, so now when you're thinking about that as a one thing divided by another, we can then think about, well, let's look at the top bit of it only. So the 300 nanograms. So we need to think about what's 300 nanograms in micrograms first of all. So 1,000 nanograms is 1 microgram, and we had to divide by 1,000. So here we have to divide by 1,000. So that gives us 0.3 Okay, so that's 0.3 micrograms per mil. But I actually want milli, so I'm going to have to do another 1,000 times, aren't I? So now I've got 0.3 micrograms, and I want to know how many milligrams. And I know there's 1,000 micrograms in 1 milligram, so I'm going to have to divide by 1,000 to both of them. So that's going to be 0.0003 nanograms per milliliter. But I actually want it in nanograms per litre. So I can write 0.0003 nanograms. And instead of writing a milliliter, or 1 milliliter, or 1,000 milliliters is 1 litre. So 1 milliliter, I've got to divide by 1,000. So I have to divide by 1,000. So that's 0.001 litres. So I've just replaced a milliliter with 0.001 litres. So now, if you want, you can use your calculator to do this. 0.0003 divided by 0.001. Just give you a moment to do that on your calculator. And you should get 0.3 nanograms per litre. Okay, so that's one type of calculation. If we think about another type of calculation, say we've worked out a flow rate in, say it's 5 litres per hour. We want to convert that to millilitres per minute. We can use a similar sort of approach, so 5 litres per hour, if we write it like that. Now we want 5 litres, how many millilitres is that? So 5 litres is 5,000 millilitres. And that's 1 hour, so that's 60 minutes. So 5,000 divided by 60 is 83.3 mils per minute. Or if I wanted to, I could write 83.3 minutes to the minus 1. It's the same thing.